This is the weed rush, creating the intricate economic plot. This is Jamaica. It is known for its intriguing history of the amalgamation of various cultures. It is known for its pristine travel destinations and booming tourism industry. It is home to Rastafarian religion and culture, to which most people associate the drug marijuana. The cannabis or hemp plant originally evolved in Central Asia before people introduced the plant into Africa, Europe, and eventually the Americas. Hemp fiber was used to make clothing, paper, sails, and rope, and its seeds were used as food. These early hemp plants had very low levels of tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, the chemical responsible for marijuana's mind-altering effects. There is some evidence that ancient cultures knew about the psychoactive properties of the cannabis plant. They may have cultivated some varieties to produce higher levels of THC for use in religious ceremonies or healing practice. Cannabis was introduced to Jamaica in the 1850s to 1860s by indentured servants imported from India during British rule of both nations. Many of the terms used in cannabis culture in Jamaica are based on Indian terms, including the term ganja. Over the years, cannabis has been deeply rooted in the Jamaican culture. The plant has been a muse of reggae music as well as a sacrament in the Rastafarian faith. Not to mention, the island's climate provides one of the most ideal conditions for cultivation. The government's association of marijuana with crime and violence stems from the drug's connections to the international drug trade. There was also the matter of the police blaming crimes on marijuana because they came to the conclusion that anywhere ganja was, there were also guns and criminals. But in recent times, this association has begun to fade, in large part due to the studies being conducted on the numerous benefits of marijuana, both in the medicine industry and the economy. Marijuana has received a lot of attention for its medicinal and recreational purposes. But we should be mindful of another use: religious ceremonies. Rastafarianism, along with some Native American tribes, do not see cannabis as a fun party drug, but as a way to aid in meditation, gain wisdom, and use it as a sacrament. Rastafarians began incorporating marijuana or ganja into their religious ceremonies in the late 1800s by indentured East Indians who were brought to the island to work after slavery ended. It just so happened that Jamaica had one of the best climates to grow the plant. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, established in 1948 by the United Nations, is an edict that outlines the basic rights and fundamental freedoms all humans are entitled to, despite race, religion, or ideologies. Article 18 states everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. This declaration is also found in Article 17(1) of Jamaica's Constitution and has been the founding argument by Rastafarians that their arrest and conviction for the sacramental use and possession of ganja is unconstitutional. Ras Baya, a member of the Bobo Shanti tribe, said that humanitarian principles take precedence, hence our right to practice our religion, and Rastafari religion includes the use of ganja as a sacrament. On Wednesday, November 2, 2016, Bongo Beard, a Rastafarian, was traveling through the streets of Montego Bay. He was on his way to a Nyabingi celebration to mark the anniversary of the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen of Ethiopia, a significant annual celebration for the Rastafari community. While traveling, Bongo Beard was stopped and searched by police. He had in his possession 10 pounds of ganja, which was to be used as a sacrament during the ceremony he was attending. He was taken to the Barnett Street Police Station in Montego Bay, where he was held for an hour and a half, then subsequently told he could leave without the ganja. This is the event that led to the changes that took place between the government and the Rastafarian community because it was a breach of their human rights, because the ganja was not recreational but religious in this instance. Public opinion on marijuana has shifted greatly in a positive direction as its benefits have become highlighted and stereotypes regarding the subject have been debunked. This has led to many countries relaxing their legislations and even outright legalizing it, while attempting to regulate its use and manage its supply. Some examples of this are as follows. In the UK, doctors have been allowed to prescribe cannabis products. South Korea has legalized strictly controlled medical use despite prosecuting residents for recreational use overseas. A death sentence given to a young man selling cannabis oil has stirred debate about legalization in Malaysia. South Africa's highest court legalized the use of cannabis by adults in private places. Lesotho became the first African country to legalize the cultivation of marijuana for medicinal purposes. Lebanon is considering the legalization of cannabis production for medical purposes to help its economy. Jamaica has made steps to modernize its policies on marijuana, but it is sadly lagging behind and does not seem to be making any substantial moves to capitalize on marijuana or change the negative perception on it. Therefore, the nation is losing its chance to be a major player in the weed rush that is taking place in other countries. In America, marijuana has been illegal since 1970 under the Federal Controlled Substances Act and listed as a Schedule I drug. That means for the purposes of federal law, marijuana has no currently accepted medical use and has a high potential for abuse, just like heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. At that time, marijuana was also illegal under the laws of every state. But over the last 2 decades, the map of state marijuana laws has undergone a significant transformation. California was the first state to legalize marijuana for medical purposes in 1996. Other states gradually started to follow suit, and what began as a trickle has now become a flood. In the last few years, the number of states passing laws to allow the legal use of marijuana in some form has skyrocketed. Very few issues can match the rapid uptick in public support that marijuana legalization has seen over the last 2 decades. Medical marijuana, in particular, is popular amongst just about every demographic group, and while support for recreational legalization lags somewhat behind that for medical, it remains well above the 50% mark and continues to rise. Canada legalized cannabis use for medical purposes in 1999. Legalization of cannabis for recreational purposes in October 2018 offered the opportunity to assess the impact of recreational legalization on cancer patients' patterns of use to identify learning points that could be helpful to other countries considering similar legislation. Canada legalized the use of plant-derived cannabis for medical purposes in 1999, allowing medical cannabis producers to become licensed to sell dried plant product and later oil extracts to patients online with stringent quality standards, including clear labeling of THC and CBD content and documentation of absence of mold or pesticide residues. Finally, the production, sale, and possession of any form of medicinal or recreational marijuana products are illegal in Cuba. Cuba has one of the lowest homicide rates amongst Latin American countries. Its leaders largely believe this is to be because of their tough on drugs stance. While some countries like Canada and Australia have legalized or partially legalized and maintain very low homicide rates, other countries see a huge influx of violence caused by drug-related crime. Each of these countries have created measures in support of or against marijuana. In America, recent public opinion polls put support for medical marijuana in 2017 at 88% and 93% nationwide. Support for medical marijuana is among the typically less supportive demographic groups like Republicans, women, and people of color. Even among those who oppose legalizing recreational marijuana, a majority support allowing its medical use. In 1969, only 12% of the country agreed that marijuana use should be legal. That percentage had only increased to about 33% by the early 2000s. It wasn't until the next decade that things really began to shift. In 2014, 2 years after Colorado and Washington voted to legalize recreational marijuana, public support for legalization hit the 50% mark nationwide. By 2017, polls clocked current support at 61% and 60%. The Canadian government announced that as of October 17, 2018, Canada would be the second country in the world after Uruguay to set up a separate legal cannabis access system for recreational use. After the Cannabis Act came into force, sale, possession, production, and distribution of cannabis in Canada have been legal. Recreational dispensaries were allowed to apply for permission from Health Canada to sell a variety of cannabis-based products to any purchaser 18 years of age or older, but were not permitted to provide medical information to purchasers. The products had to be derived from a Health Canada-approved source, and only dried plant products or oils were permitted. Meanwhile, Cuba still has the death penalty for possessing, cultivating, and trafficking drugs. That includes weed. Even though Cuba has recently opened up to the rest of the world, that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. If you have a medical marijuana prescription and are traveling to Cuba, do not assume this will mean you'll avoid any trouble. Weed in all its forms is legal in Cuba. Your prescription likely will not mean anything to the local authorities, so because of this, do not bring medical marijuana to Cuba. Both America and Canada have reaped economical benefits from the legalization of marijuana. In America, data from recreational use states indicates growth in legal sales and use. For example, in Colorado, monthly recreational sales were between $10 million and $20 million in early 2012. These sales have stabilized to around $90 million per month in 2018, or around $1 billion per year. Oregon had the second highest usage rate in the country in 2017 to 2018, with 20% of adults using marijuana at least one time in the past month. Canada's cannabis industry generates about $8.16 billion Canadian dollars to the country's economy. The legal cannabis industry contributed about $3.96 billion Canadian dollars to Canada's gross domestic product as of February. In Cuba, since marijuana is illegal, the country has seen no economic benefits from its legalization. To maintain their support or opposition, these countries have implemented various regulatory measures. Today, 29 American states have legalized medical marijuana, 8 of which also permit recreational use, and another 17 allow the limited use of non-intoxicating marijuana extracts to treat certain medical conditions. Roughly 201 million Americans currently live in states where marijuana is legal for general medical use, and the nearly 70 million live in states where recreational use by adults is also allowed. So roughly 98% of Americans live in a state that has legalized some form of marijuana. Marijuana is now legal under state laws on both coasts, in the north and south, in red states and blue states, and even in the heartland. In Canada, marijuana is subject to provincial or territorial restrictions. Adults who are 18 years of age or older are legally able to possess up to 30 grams of legal cannabis, share up to 30 grams of legal cannabis with other adults, buy dried or fresh cannabis and cannabis oil from some provincially licensed retailers, purchase cannabis online from federally licensed producers, grow up to 4 cannabis plants per residence for personal use, and make cannabis products such as food and drinks at home as long as organic solvents are not used to create concentrated products. In Cuba, you will be sentenced to death penalty if you are in the possession of
how to grow it. But in less than 5 years, there'll be very little value in growing weed in Jamaica. It will be like any other commodity. The true value in the future of ganja, cannabis, and I call it ganja because I don't want the world to take away our brand, will be in pharmaceuticals and branding. But today, no small farmer with historical know-how will ever meet the standards now required for production. The licensing authority is approaching it as if every applicant wants to become an exporter. This established bureaucracy is locking out our small farmers, Mr. Speaker. The same one who created the product so many years ago and suffered at the hands of the police for something which is now a global sensation and is legal in several countries have no way of getting a slice of that taste. It's them do it, it's them build it. If those small farmers never go up in the hills for 3-4 months and sit down and hide, you wouldn't know about Jamaican good ganja. Straight. The government must establish and fund a facility in partnership with one of our universities to allow small farmers to manufacture and process their raw weed for a fee. Into products that the market demands. This must be a national lab. It must be a national Jamaican lab. So when the Israelis or the Coloradians or anybody else hear about it, they must know that they can come to the Jamaican National Ganja Lab. And Mr. Speaker, this lab must have the added responsibility of promoting Jamaican ganja, the best in the world. Mr. Speaker, we need to stand up for our ganja brand, right? We need to stand up for it. We have the competitive advantage of branding of this product in the world, but this is disappearing fast, and I don't want to see it disappear. All of us have an obligation to make sure that we don't see it disappear.
Let us take a look at the measures that the Jamaican government is implementing to protect this industry. The Jamaican government has made efforts to protect this industry by implementing some measures. Currently, they provide the option for an individual to acquire a license from the Cannabis Licensing Authority. The Cannabis Licensing Authority, CLA, was established in 2015 under the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act, DDA, with the aim of developing and regulating Jamaica's legal marijuana and hemp industries. The CLA, however, started operations in 2016 and issued the Dangerous Drugs Cannabis Licensing Interim Regulations. On May 14, 2020, the CLA released a statement stating that they have been updating and providing input on drafts of the Dangerous Drugs Cannabis Import and Export Licensing Regulations 2020 after comprehensive consultations with its stakeholders. The third draft of the regulation was recently revised and suggestions and requests for further changes were sent to the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries. MICAF has since sent the Ministry of Justice its final draft regulations. The statement also mentioned that Minister of State in MICAF, Floyd Green, stated that whilst the CLA awaits the promulgation of these regulations, it has put in place protocols to facilitate both the import and export of cannabis ganja by licensing. These protocols, the interim measures, importation of cannabis, and the interim measures, exportation of cannabis, can be found on the CLA's website. Green also claims that MICAF has been collaborating closely with the Ministry of Justice on the regulations and implementations. However, let's take a look at how these measures are affecting the industry in Jamaica. Let's see if they are affecting them positively or rather affecting them negatively. Every industry needs laws to regulate and protect it, and the individuals who are in it. That is understandable. However, when these laws are actively marginalizing individuals who have a vested interest in marijuana or who are not at a certain income bracket, this may cause a problem. The National Alliance for the Legalization of Ganja, NALG, has been actively advocating for the deconstruction of the CLA. The argument is that the market is regulated by a few powerful individuals. It is hard for a regular ganja farmer to gain access to this market as it is more costly for them. They cannot afford it. And thus, these regular ganja farmers, these regular small farmers, must resort to supplying smugglers who are underpaying them for their produce. Another thing that we must take a look at is whether or not the initial pioneers of this herb in Jamaica, the Rastafarians, are benefiting from these new regulations. Being victims of the Jamaican government in previous times, years namely 1958 to 1960, the Rastafarian community was under attack, beating them, trimming them, arresting them, and labeling them as cannibals and black-hearted men. The Rastafarian community was marginalized from society. Their culture, their music, their religious practices, basically them, were outlawed and were undesired by society. It was not until Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, brought their culture and practices to the world through their music was Rastafarian culture accepted in Jamaica. Today, the image of Jamaicans around the world is aligned with the Rastas. Individuals around the world believe that people are born Rastafarians rather. They, however, are not benefiting from this industry. Because of the high entrance cost to this industry, members of the Rastafarian community who are not affluent are automatically cut from the possible list of individuals who would gain the cultivation license. Isn't that ironic? We stole their culture after mistreating them and monetized it, after which we locked them out of. The culture they were embarrassed for, persecuted for, we even hated them for it. They died for this culture. That same culture, they are now locked out of it. Is that right? In a survey conducted, we found that out of the 147 respondents, the media has influenced 111 people to believe that marijuana is a dangerous drug associated with criminals and substance abusers, even with initiatives similar to ours. 119 persons maintain this perspective. Clearly, the media has a direct effect on people's perceptions. Even so, 112 persons agree that marijuana should be fully legalized because it would benefit the country economically, the country, namely Jamaica. Subsequently, 104 respondents indicated that there are people who fear discussing the legalization of marijuana in the formal social environments.
Some university students were asked, how can the legislation of marijuana benefit the Jamaican economy? And why do people avoid discussing this topic in formal social settings? These are some of their responses.
I think the legalization of marijuana can benefit the Jamaican economy in terms of it will definitely bring up our exports. Because for one, you see, once we decriminalize marijuana and we factor it into brand Jamaica, and I think literally the sky is the limit, because for one, it would sell because we have a stereotype known as Jamaicans. All we do, we are Rasta and we smoke weed. So I think once the government kind of factors that into brand Jamaica, then we can start exporting marijuana. And not just marijuana itself, but its byproducts as well. Marijuana oil, and don't let me even get started on like the medicinal purposes and just like recreational purposes that the marijuana can bring. So it's a very marketable product, and I think that once Jamaica decriminalizes it, the sky is literally the limit.
Hi everyone. So I was asked a question on how the legalization of marijuana could directly impact the Jamaican economy. And my answer to that question is marijuana has always been a product that is demanded worldwide. And in Jamaica, or as Jamaicans, I could see, we have always just associated marijuana to negative outcomes, such as crime, violence, delinquency, and the list goes on. But if we could look at the positive side effects of cultivating this product, which includes to export to various countries, which would bring in foreign exchange, we could increase the employment rate in Jamaica by cultivating this product alone. There are also various medicinal benefits of this product, which includes alleviating pain. It helps with anxiety, depression, ADHD.
I believe that the legalization of marijuana can greatly benefit the Jamaican economy through incentives such as increasing tax revenues, job growth, and also investment opportunities. I also believe that people avoid the topic of legalizing marijuana in formal social settings because marijuana legalization is a very controversial and multifaceted issue. The legalization of cannabis would mean that persons currently using it to treat medical conditions illegally can now acquire it and use it legally. However, many cannabis advocates argue that it should also be legalized in the recreational domain. It has also been argued that it may add to driving under the influence burdens and resulting in a further strain on resources as well as increased driving accidents.
That's a very good question. Legalization of marijuana is a well-needed step for medicine, not just for Jamaica, but I think for the wider world when you take a holistic approach towards medicine. And that's what really, the aim is, to treat patients as naturally as possible. I think Western medicine over the years has traditionally relied on the use of pharmaceutical companies with highly synthesized products that have been altered in its from its innate form. And I think that Jamaica, being one of the prime producers or primary locations for well-grown cannabis, will start to benefit with its legalization, especially from the medical perspective. Marijuana has two components. It has the THC component and the CBD component. The THC component is what creates this euphoric high, which is what it is known for in popular culture across the world, and it has basically created its own little niche and has unfortunately fueled the taboo that is associated with its use, and that has caused some reservation with its use in medicine across the world, because a lot of patients are of the impression that once you use cannabis in its medicinal form, that you will get this sensation of a high and a euphoric feeling, but that's not so. Medicinal marijuana extracts the CBD component in its highest and purest form, and this is what is used to treat many ailments such as chronic pain, fatigue, anxiety, diabetes, hypertension, spasticity, Alzheimer's disease. So, we serve to benefit so much from its use in terms of legalization in Jamaica. I think that it can only be an upward step, an upward mobility for the country in a whole in terms of commerce, because once it is that we are producing high grade quality marijuana and we are basically using it for medical purposes in a controlled manner and even exporting it in a controlled manner, we serve to benefit from it. And it's the move towards the right direction in terms of being more independent in terms of our produce and being more able to be self-reliant in terms of being able to treat our ailments. It's just a matter of controlled use of the marijuana once it is legalized, but I'm definitely 100% for the legalization of marijuana for medicinal use, for uses such as commerce and export that will serve the country to benefit in this platform.
If these students can see the benefits of marijuana legislation, then others can too. Take it from the medical perspective. And if that was not enough, take it from an economist. The advantages are endless. Medically, the byproducts of marijuana have been proven to aid in the treatment of glaucoma, seizures, and some types of cancer. CBD, cannabidiol, is one of the compounds of marijuana that has been found to reduce inflammation in the body. It can benefit the treatment of Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and rheumatoid arthritis. Furthermore, doctors in countries where medicinal marijuana is legal may prescribe marijuana to help in conditions of anxiety, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and PTSD. Economically, the legalization of marijuana could impact tax revenue. In 2019, Colorado collected all of $302 million in taxes and fees on a sale of $1.7 billion of medicinal and recreational marijuana. legalization of marijuana could also create many jobs for Jamaican citizens. Setting up nurseries and dispensaries could create jobs since workers would be needed to farm, process, distribute, and sell marijuana-based products. It could go as far as to provide opportunities for software developers, financing services, construction companies, and many others. Finally, should marijuana become completely legal, marijuana companies would be free to list their stocks on all exchanges, thereby enhancing liquidity and opening up access to many more investors. Yet, as the media continues to poison our minds of the negative associations of marijuana, people remain afraid to support the legalization of marijuana. But why? The spiral of silence theory explains that because the majority of people in our society support the notion that marijuana legalization would not benefit the economy, persons having the opposite view remain silent because they fear isolation. They believe that their opinion is unpopular, and if expressed, they would face social isolation, rejection, and possibly ostracism. But did you know that just by sharing this documentary, this can all be switched around? The theory implies that highly vocal holders of a minority opinion can end up having a disproportionate influence on public discourse. Therefore, if more people continue to publicly support the view that marijuana legalization can benefit the Jamaican economy, they can influence a change in the legalization. The desired change in the legalization is for marijuana to become commercially available under suitable regulations. Should this happen, Jamaica would benefit from increased tax revenues, job growth, and investment opportunities. However, this can only happen if the views expressed in this documentary are reiterated by other members of society. The improvement of the Jamaican economy by means of legalizing marijuana lies in the hands of the citizens who are afraid to voice their opinions.